Starting in the 1950s, Everett Henry did a series of literary maps. Not just maps that would show kind of the lay of the land of where things happened, but actually a map that would show kind of the flow of the story, the actual drama of what took place. Beautiful, colorful, wonderful works. What we've all seen these over time, but what we didn't know was the originals were saved and donated to the Library of Congress thanks to the actions of one employee that loved them from the time he saw them, and then over decades would always make sure that he kept track of the company and made sure that they eventually made it to Library of Congress. Today, a talk with Rich Foley. Real quick, a bit about your background. Based in Ohio, went to school, got into engineering, landed that job with Harris Seybold.
Yes.
And what were you doing for them?
Design engineer.
Okay. Harris Seybold, for those that aren't aware, and as times have changed, it can kind of fall out of people's kind of memory. They were a powerhouse for making the best printing presses you can imagine at the time. These are folks that, from 1906 to 76, they made literally thousands of presses, including some for the military. Presses small enough that you could use them on an aircraft carrier or use them out in the field. So you'd be able to print up maps for the sake of troops or whatever engagement was going on. What was it like working for them?
It was a very good company. We knew when we started working there that they were a leader in the manufacture of sheet-fed offset printing presses for the graphic arts industry. Mm-hmm. And they were high quality, and they had excellent management, which we all respected. And we had several plants around the company with very good workers. And it was an enjoyable time.
Awesome. But the hub itself for the business was still based in Cleveland?
The corporate offices were in Cleveland. The first company started in Niles, Ohio. It's called Harris Automatic Press Company. Then later on, they combined with Seybold. Charles Seybold was a entrepreneur in Dayton, Ohio, manufactured paper cutters and things for the industry. So they combined in 1927.
Okay.
And became Harris Seybold Company.
Now, if you're a printing company at the time, one way, and this was a brilliant move, one way that you could show your quality and kind of your abilities was to have some kind of sample or something along those lines. Well, Harris Seybold came up with the idea of, let's do a set of calendars. And these calendars started back in the early 40s and used some pretty big artists. And they were masterpieces of printing. This was beyond the highest quality you could imagine for the time. This was cutting edge for what they were doing. And each year, calendars would come out sometimes in April, but I think usually in July. And they were using artists like Cleland or other people along those lines that were making these kind of patriotic, beautiful bucolic scenes, or kind of this ideal romanticized view of life.
And they continued producing these, having these advertising calendars even during World War II, where they had gone into manufacturing items for the war.
Yeah.
During World War II.
Yeah. And then post-war, we get into a time where the company decides that they're going to take on a whole different approach, and they're going to do books as maps, which was this innovative thing. There had been a couple of instances that had kind of toyed with it in the 1920s and 30s of maps that were literary based, or a map that would show kind of the setting of a book. But this was going to be a whole series that they spearheaded, aimed at, quote unquote, the red-blooded young man, and celebrating the classics, bringing those back up, and kind of providing a sense of a visual connection for those key books.
Yes, and I don't know why they chose that theme, but of course they're all man books, you might say.
Yes.
But there were other themes. Paper mills had Northwest Paper had the Canadian Mounties were always on their images. and other companies had unique maps. Timken Bearing Company brought out a series of calendars, and they had an image for each month. And so there were major corporations that had calendars. Some of the life insurance companies had calendars that were very nice in those days. It was part of printing, and they were given out by the companies as free items to their employees and also to the public market.
And in this instance, for Harris Seybold, they were actually looking at these also for educational use, that these were, upon request, you could get for free an image of, say, Robin Hood or Tom Sawyer or Huck Finn or Ivanhoe, something along those lines. And you had mentioned at one point that you had seen that there were stacks of them that were printed up that would be a request that you could get. And
yes,
have
but they only printed. I think they only printed like one printing each time, and once those and they printed them either mainly in the as a calendar with the image at the top and the months at the bottom, but they also had, and I think they were a little bit smaller, not a whole lot smaller, just the images themselves in the flat image, and they were mailed out in mailing tubes, and with the calendars there was an insert that was put in there, and it told about the thing, and like I got the insert for Moby Dick here, and at the bottom it says, this mid-year calendar is sent to you with Harris Seybold's compliments. A limited supply of prints without the calendar is available for framing. A copy may be had by writing to Harris Seybold Company in Cleveland, Ohio.
And the artist that they chose from the jump, and kind of the guy that we know most from this whole series, was Everett Henry. For those that might not remember him, he was a heck of an illustrator, did ads for a gob of people, did for Cadillac, did a lot of big names in the period. And he was a master artist and watercolorist. And matter of fact, all the map images that we're seeing out of this series, that's how they were initially done, correct?
Yes. Yeah. They were all watercolors. The only one that had any other method on it was Paul Riva used on the Jack London's Call of the Wild. For the snow scenes, there is a little bit of either oil or something else on there on those. So it's a little bit of a raised surface, but the other ones were flat surfaces, watercolors.
And so
very vivid colors.
Yeah. And so as you worked at Harris Seybold, these original paintings were all looming in the offices.
No, they were in the corporate offices in Cleveland.
Okay.
From what I remember.
Okay.
In the board of directors' offices.
Oh, okay.
Then as they were never in our, I don't think they were in the district offices.
Okay.
But as times changed when the corporate offices moved to Florida, then these paintings were moved to different plant headquarters.
Okay.
So.
And so every year they would issue.
They were framed with the wormy chestnut frames originally. And wormy chestnut, was a wood that was in the East Coast here, and very large, lots of wood available back in the 30s and 40s. But the chestnut beetle or whatever it was, or the killed all the trees. But these, and I had one of the frames. I had it here at home, and I donated it to the Library of Congress.
Oh, wow. But with this series, every year there was kind of anticipation at the company because the calendars were actually issued out in July.
Yes.
Yep. And so there was kind of a buzz that began to kind of grow.
And we did not know what the theme would be for next year.
Yeah. And so it would kind of be unveiled, and it would start this whole process of shipping things out, and kind of a whole focus on this specific novel at the same time too. That's pretty interesting. And
yes, right.
And so Everett Henry does this series from starting in 1953 and then runs up to 1961 and does a whole batch of them. I actually have, the interesting thing is later Library of Congress would do a focus on literary maps, and indeed the very cover image on the book is Everett Henry's Huck Finn. And they deal a whole lot, just a lot of it starts to pivot on this whole series of books as maps that Harris Seybold did.
They like the images. They really
do. And I have to say, it evolved. The series itself evolved from what were initially just simple maps that kind of ID'd, for instance, in Robin Hood, would ID, here's the forest, there's, where this happened or where that happened, to a point where by the time that we get to Moby Dick or Tale of Two Cities, they're complex images that deal with time and place in a kind of novel way. They become a lot more complicated, and they kind of help drag you through the entire story of what transpires. It wasn't just a cute backdrop. But he kind of pushed it into its own interesting novel approach. It was amazing stuff.
Yeah, that was, and I don't know how that occurred, whether Everett Henry did that on his own or the company wanted that. Mm-hmm. But there is definitely an increase in detail in the later prints. I mean, the later paintings, and that carried on even into. With Ken Riley doing his. Yeah.
Everett Henry dies in 1961. Paul Reba, a local Ohio hero, comes in and does Call of the Wild. And then the following year they...
Jack London's Call of the Wild.
Yeah. Right. And then the following year they picked up Ken Riley, Southwest artist.
Right.
Heck of a painter. Good gosh. And he does...
And that was really probably a little bit before he really started into the Western motif that he did so much later.
Okay.
Yeah. Because he did a lot of other illustrations for other companies at that time. But he had a history of, he was in the West and in his youth and all that. So he had a great background and everything. And,
And I think he, too, is another one of those guys that I think he initially cut his teeth doing images for pulps back in the 30s and 40s. Yes, and kind of grew and evolved.
Yeah,
and then lands firmly with both feet and does Last of the Mohicans for Harris Seybold. And then followed by Robinson Crusoe, which is that's the final. That's kind of the end of the whole series. Yeah. And
why they stopped, I don't know, but it was a great run.
Yeah, it sure was. And these are all images that I have to say the one other thing that we should probably address is the business environment is going to shift in the midst of all this occurring. And we go through the 60s and into the 70s, and printing had been this kind of staple in the economy. Harris Seybold had built itself into a dynamic business at the time. I love, too, you had mentioned that there was a great love for the people that worked there, too, and there was just this a sense of camaraderie. But even from management, you had mentioned something about their car allotment when it came to management. That that
was a personal thing that one of the ex-presidents told me. That they did not have a car allowance for anyone in general office. They always kept their headquarters limited to 100 people. Mm-hmm. No more than that, and it was pretty much decentralized operation with the corporation. Each plant had their own finance people and engineering and all that, but the corporate offices oversaw the things in general. But he said we felt it wouldn't be fair to all the employees if we couldn't offer it to everyone, so that's why we did do it.
That's so awesome. But the times changed behind it. Harris Company actually gets more and more involved even in kind of the electronic ends of things. And then the whole era of leverage buyouts hits. And next thing you know, the company could be...
That was after Harris.
Yeah, indeed.
Was, after Harris, right?
Indeed. But for some reason, you kept attention to what happened with these paintings throughout all these changes, because it's going to go from... Harris is going to evolve into another company... and then another, and then eventually we end up to, was it a German company as Man Roland Goss?
Man Roland Goss purchased, or Man Roland in Germany purchased Goss, just in the recent couple years. And so that's where the paintings ended. That's where 10 of the original paintings ended up.
At their office. You actually watched and made sure that the I mean, these paintings could have been several times over.
I knew where they were at.
Yeah. But they could have been taken home by employees, by owners. They could have just been sold off at any point. You'd mentioned at one point that the company had them individually appraised.
They had them appraised in the late 90s.
Okay.
And then they were reframed and cleaned at that time. I was not with the company when they did that.
Okay.
And from then on, they were protected. They were hung together, in hallways or something like that. They were never they were very well taken care of.
Mm-hmm. But you put the bug in Manuel and Goss's ear of, hey, those are really great, and they should really be someplace where they'll be appreciated. How did that happen?
Well, I kept track of these, and as new owners of the company would occur, I would send an email. I started the history of the paintings back in the early 90s, and I would email them a PDF file for the history and remind them that they were important to the company, for the history of the company, and take care of them. And then if you ever want to do anything with them, the Library of Congress would be interested in having them, and especially after the Language of the Land exhibit was put on in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And so after that, and they had mentioned at that time, if the company ever thought about doing anything, we would like to have them. But by that time, Library of Congress and their Geography and Map Division had copies of all the prints, and they were good copies of the prints. A few calendars and the other prints, and they had digitized a few of them, but not all of them.
Was it just this past summer that you got the chance to actually see them finally make it to their final home?
In November, my family and I made a trip to Washington, and we saw both prints and we saw the originals, 10 of the 10 originals, existing ones, all in beautiful frames and very well preserved and in climate-controlled conditions, and they're going to be there a long time.
Yay, fantastic.
And now they're property of the people of the United States.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
So that's neat.
In transacting back and forth with companies over time, did they get it as to what they had?
I think they did. I think they knew the history of it, and I think they respected that. They did a great job of maintaining them. They really did. It was very, very, very well done. I'm sure it was not a monetary decision that they did. It was strictly they aren't worth that much money, but it's just the idea that they're still together, and it was part of the company.
Yeah, it was very much doing the right thing in what they've done as far as donation. That's fantastic. So in the midst of everything at Library of Congress, we were just talking about that, is, they'll have manuscript maps by George Washington. They have the first map that ever names America. And now they'll have this set of images that have kind of become the backbone of how we think of literary maps.
Yeah, they have some good buddies there in that room.
That's for sure.
They're a minor part of that collection that the Library of Congress has. It's in the basement of the Madison Building. It's unbelievable, and it's open. There's a reading room there, and people can request maps and get prints of maps and all that. And of course, it does affect the price of maps out on the open market, because now a lot of these maps are digitized, mm-hmm. and people can print them for their home and all that. But it is we're just lucky that they're there.
Yeah,
it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's funny. It seems like it's going to go full circle in a sense. The initial interest for Harris Seybold was that they would be able to offer these for educational use, schools, libraries, and indeed, we'll get a chance to see that repeated, where through Library of Congress now, all of these will be offered as high-res scans that all you need to do is download, take it on your thumb drive, and visit your local printer.
What I understand will happen. That's not happened yet, but that's, from what I understand, that's their intent.
Yeah. Mr. Foley, I cannot thank you on behalf of the U.S. Thanks for being diligent to make sure that these didn't get lost in time, but made it to the right home in the end. Well done.
Well, as I mentioned, I kind of kept some of this quiet until all this happened. because just for the protection of the paintings themselves and the privacy of the corporation that had them, I felt that that's the correct thing to do, which I always did.
Yeah.
So even in my history, I never mentioned where the originals were located.
Well done, Rich Foley, and congratulations to the Library of Congress. They did want us to point out, while it's a healthy body of work that they have as far as the originals by Everett Henry, they're still missing 2 out of the set. So there are still 2 of the originals that are floating around somewhere yet to be discovered. Thanks for listening. Feel free to contact us at newprojectionscast@gmail.com, and can't wait to catch you next time.